One guy who is featured very prominently on TexasFootball.com/playoffs because his squad is into the 6A Division I regional final in that brutal Region 3 is the head coach of the defending 6A Division I state champs. We are joined by Coach Jon Kay. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
We are doing wonderful. I imagine that you're happy to be talking to us, if only because that means you're still alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you're playing, this time of year, even though it's extraordinarily hot down here in Houston, it's a good time to be practicing, no question.
Yeah, there's no such thing, as bad December practices.
No question.
That is for sure. I want to ask you about your game last week against Katy. Obviously, a matchup of two defending champs in 6A. After the game, you did an interview with our friends at Texan Live, and it seemed to me that you were a bit emotional after that game. That's a really hard-fought game, and you guys come out with it. Can you take us through a little bit of your emotions during that game?
Well, it's one of those things that are bittersweet. I mean, obviously, you're happy to win a football game and move on, but when you walk through that line, shaking hands with a team like Katy, and you see the look in those kids' eyes, and you know what they poured into the season and what their expectations were. I mean, obviously, we've been on that side of the coin many times, but it was just to see two teams just go out there and throw punches after punch and give everything that they got. It was one of those that you hate walking away knowing someone didn't win, but that's the competition part of it.
I want to take you back to the critical part of that game. Katy hits this long pass down to the 2-yard line, and so they've got first and goal at the 2, trailing by 3 points. And it's Katy. This is what they do. They score from the 2-yard line. What was going through your mind at that point? Was there any thought to, okay, we need to make sure we save some time so we can go back down and score, or was this, let's just trust our defense?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that was the plan initially, is we ended up burning our timeouts down there just to make sure that if they were to score, that we had an opportunity to at least have a little bit of time left to try to, get back into the thing. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is an amazing play by our safety, Jalen Thomas, who ended up making the tackle at the 2-yard line where, kids in that situation on that kind of stage, I've seen so many times just kind of concede the score. And, despite the fact that he caught the ball on a good route and a good adjustment, and a ball that got there. Really proud of JT for coming up with the tackle and letting his teammates do the rest. So that's the kind of, never say die attitude that I think our kids have, and I think that's what's made us successful right now.
You guys have obviously had a lot of success, the defending champs, and now you guys are looking for another title. Can you tell us what's different about this team than last year's team, or is it mostly the same?
No, there's a lot of, and I think I've said this before. It's the beauty of this profession is that every kid is different, and every group is different. Every dynamic of the team is different, and that's what keeps it exciting. And you could sit at a desk and that stapler never changes in 30 years, but we don't deal with that. We deal with kids that are changed daily, and group dynamics change daily. And this group is much different, I think. However, it's football. At the end of the day, you better be able to run the ball. You better be able to play some defense. You better be great in special teams. You better be able to control turnovers. And I think that part is consistent with what we were able to do last year, but this is definitely a different kind of group.
Speaking of defense, that's been unquestionably the strength of your team. But you go back, and you guys have had a great year all year defensively, but it seems like you guys are starting to peak. It seems like you guys are the defense is really playing as well as it has all year long, and that's saying something. Would you say that you see this team, this defense coming together more and more as the weeks go on?
Yeah, I think that's also been something these kids have been able to do the last couple of years, is just consistently improve throughout the course of the year. And I think our defensive staff and our offensive staff does a phenomenal job of just continuing to push and teach and coach, and regardless of how small it is or regardless of the outcome of the game, of still trying to address our weaknesses and build on our strengths. And I think when you do that through the course of a long season, you start to see some kids improve and start to peak at the right time. So hopefully that's the case. We've got an explosive attack to see the team in front of us that if I could say anything about them, I'd say that they just continually improve, and I think they're playing their best football right now.
We're talking with Jon Kay, the head coach of the Galena Park North Shore Mustangs here on DCTF Live. Get involved with the conversation at hashtag DCTF Live. Coach, there is no doubt that you guys have earned your way here. You guys were put into maybe the most brutal region.
The region of death.
We have ever seen. When those brackets, and obviously you guys had an idea of how these things were going to shake out, but I mean, you guys run through a pretty solid Pasadena Memorial team, and then the second round Dickinson, and then a third round Katy, and now a Atascocita team that's playing as well as anybody in the state. When the brackets came out and they got finalized, was there a little bit of gulping going on in the in the North Shore coaches' offense?
I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of excitement, and I think most of the coaches in the Houston area they knew what was going to happen in D1. We knew that kind of before this year this came through. But I think what our staff and our kids have done a great job, starting with last year, is just taking games one at a time. And obviously there was a looking at the bracket early on, and I think any team that looked beyond the game that they had in front of them, given the competition of the Region 3 and Division 1, is probably at home, because you had to take them one at a time. And I thought our staff and our kids did a great job of it. But obviously Pasadena Memorial did a great job in their district, and we're able to get some big wins this year. So that was a good win for us. And then to play just a phenomenal Dickinson team with John Snelson and what he's done down there with that program, and have to play down there in Dickinson with the weather. It was just, a lot of reasons that you could turn it down. And then of course playing Katy in the NRG Stadium with the kind of team that they're going to have year in and year out. But at the end of the day, it comes down to getting into the regional finals. That's where we're at, and that's where our focus is now.
And you're one guy who's really stood out to me, and he kind of burst on the scene at the beginning of the year, was Brian Beatty, your outstanding quarterback. And this is a kid who takes over for a guy who led a team to a title last year in Micaiah Long. He takes over, and you guys seems like he's really grown into the role and improved week in and week out. As the guy who gets to see him every day in practice, what can you tell us about your outstanding signal caller?
As athletic as he is and the numbers that he's putting up, until you understand the intangibles that he brings to this team day in and day out, be it leadership in the classroom, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the community, in the locker room, in the field house, in the weight room, he's just constantly holding himself to a standard that is beyond what most kids do. And I think what makes him special is he's going to hold his teammates to that same standard. And those guys, they've just respected his leadership so much. And, he's a kid that's been a varsity player for us for 3 years. And the reality is he took snaps as a quarterback in every game last year, including the state championship game. So it wasn't exactly like we're throwing him into the fire, but the way that he has evolved into being the every down quarterback, and the pressures that come along with that and the responsibilities that come with that, I can't say enough about his character.
But enough about the skill kids. Let's talk about the big hog mollies. Those are that's my favorite part of your team. I'll tell you, we knew going into that game with Katy that it was going to be a war in the trenches, and your defensive line and your offensive line held up against some of the best in the state at Katy. And I know you take a lot of pride in the fact that people are talking about your offensive line and your defensive line as some of the best in the state.
Yeah, I mean, our offensive line, you talk about a group of hardworking kids that are as blue-collar as they come. And again, I know we talk a lot about being on the east side of Houston, but you talk about a position group that represents the area that they're from. I couldn't say enough about our offensive line and the way those kids have come together. Derek Fitzhenry and Corey Laxton, our two offensive line coaches, have been phenomenal of just getting everything out of those kids. And when push came to shove and we needed that first down to run the clock out at the end, that was something we weren't able to do in week 2 against Man. And to be able to do it against a team like Katy and something that we've worked on all year long, and understanding situational football, I couldn't say enough about those guys. Our defensive line, I think, is a little bit undersized but very athletic, and I think they were able to use their athleticism with some schemes that our defensive staff put together. Same thing, Coach Lewis and Coach Young, our D-line coach, have done a phenomenal job getting those guys. But the reality is, in my opinion, they're going to see the best offensive line that we've seen all year in Atascocita. And these guys are big, they're physical, they're well coached, and we're going to have to be on our game in order to come out of this one alive as well.
Speaking of Atascocita, you guys do draw them 7:30 p.m. Friday night at NRG Stadium in Houston. You guys are back at the home of the Texans to take on a team you've already played and you've already beat. About 2 months ago, you guys took down Atascocita 31-21, but that was the closest game you guys had played until last week. And so for you, as you're preparing for this Atascocita team, is there any change in what you're looking at from 2 months ago to what you're seeing now?
Well, I think that's the key. The key words there is 2 months ago. And when you're dealing with 16, 17, 18-year-olds, 2 months is an eternity when it comes to maturing and developing and getting to where you need to be. And, I can see on film that they've definitely improved as a football team. Their receiving core is as explosive as anybody. They got a great offensive line. The quarterback, I think, is probably one of the most underrated players in the state, despite the fact that he does get some accolades. I don't know that people truly understand the release and the vision of Boyd and what he can do defensively. They've got some great players in the back end and very big and strong in the front seven. So, it's one of those things when you play somebody twice in a year, it kind of creates an enigma of, what do you do? Do you do what you did that was successful 2 months ago, or do you start, anticipating what counter punches are going to be thrown? And next thing you know, you find yourself defending ghosts and things that haven't really existed or that you haven't seen that you're just anticipating. So it makes it tough. I'm proud of 21-6A for having 2 teams in the regional final, especially given the kind of competition we had in our region this year. But, we know we're going to have our hands full at 7:30 on Friday, and we got nothing but respect for the Tascasita Eagles.
We're talking with Jon Kay, the head coach of the Galena Park North Shore Mustangs here on DCTF Live. Get involved in the conversation, #DCTF Live. Coach, one more question before we let you go. You guys got to play 6 playoff games last year, and you got to play on the biggest stage. And now, how important was that for this year, of getting those kids that experience under the spotlight? Because you know as well as anybody that's something that a lot of teams can't handle. A lot of teams can't handle that big stage. How important was it for you guys to play those playoff games last year and get that experience under the bright lights?
I think it is, and we're talking about these kids varsity now that some of them have been through this, but I think equally as important is the extra 6 weeks of practice. We've had kids that weren't role players last year on that team, but are this year. And, I said it since the beginning, when we had 6 extra weeks of practice last year, added with 4 weeks of spring ball, if these kids aren't ready to go in 2016, we've got nobody to blame but ourselves. So I think we have gained some things so far as experience on the big stage with the kids that are returners, but equally as important to me is the development of our under-level kids from last year's team to be able to get them ready to be able to function in the kind of pressure situations we've been in thus far.
And you do know that most people do lose a playoff game in their coaching career, right? Are you familiar? Are you aware that that's usually the case? Because right now, you're undefeated in playoff games. I believe now 9-0 in playoff games. I imagine you don't have any plans on giving up that streak.
Well, we did lose one to Cy Ranch in a 31-27 game against Katy in 2014. So I'm sorry, at U of H we played them, and that was a heck of a ball game too. And Cy Ranch went on to state finals, and they got a great program over there. So right now at the end of the day, I've never played it down for North Shore, and this program is better for it. So it's about the kids and what we're able to do with them, and we're just focused on the Tascasita.
He is Jon Kay. He is the head coach of the regional finalist Galena Park North Shore Mustangs. See them 7:30 p.m. Friday at NRG Stadium in Houston as they take on a very good Humboldt Tascasita squad. Coach, appreciate your time. Congratulations on all your success so far, and best of luck on Friday night.
Hey, appreciate everything you guys do for high school football in this state. Have a great day.